All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations for Web Development and Design with HTML5 by Terry Felke-Morris, the 8th edition. We're into the home stretch now. I'm in Chapter 12 of 14. Chapter 12 is about the concept of e-commerce, and as you notice here, we have about 8 objectives. We want to define e-commerce, identify both the benefits and the risks of e-commerce, discuss or describe some different e-commerce business models, describe the importance of security and encryption as far as e-commerce goes, define the concept of electronic data interchange, more commonly known as EDI, describe trends and projections for e-commerce, so look into the future a little bit, describe e-commerce related issues, and describe options for order and payment processing. So, what is e-commerce? The author defines it as the integration of communications, data management, and security technology to allow individuals and organizations to exchange information related to the sale of goods and services. What does that mean? That means being able to electronically buy and sell, for lack of better words. Also, it's the performance of financial transactions. If you've ever gone into, it still amazes me the number of people. I'll go into the Wentzville Walmart to buy my groceries, and the number of people who are in there that have credit and debit cards, etc., who don't know how to use them. All right, but they are performing e-commerce. Some advantages, well, reduce costs. And it's not exactly the same thing, but I was surprised. I went to the Target that's in St. Peters, Missouri last weekend, and I had not been in that Target. I was in there, I think, once before in my life, but I was surprised that when I went in there, they had about 4 or 5 self-checkouts. I know Walmart has them, and I know other places do as well. But why are they doing that? Well, one of the reasons is for reduced costs. Well, if you've got a company that doesn't have a brick and mortar business, so it doesn't have a physical location, you're going to have less people that you're employing, so your costs will be reduced. Increased customer satisfaction. Well, we live today in a world where, for example, my middle daughter has Amazon Prime, and virtually everything she buys today, she very rarely goes to the store. She's 25 years old, and like I said, virtually every single thing she buys online. She buys it through Amazon, and with Amazon Prime, she doesn't pay for shipping, and she gets it within 2 business days. Doing all this stuff will typically result in more effective data management, and all the stuff is probably tied together directly or indirectly to one or more databases, potentially higher sales. All right, and if you don't believe that, just think about Amazon. And think about the fact right now that literally millions of people at any time of day are buying goods and services on Amazon at any one time. So those are advantages for businesses. As far as consumers, convenience. It's the old joke about you can be in your slippers and jammies and you can go online and buy whatever you want to or need to buy. You can comparison shop. So I can compare Best Buy with, somebody else. Let's say Walmart has it, or Target has it, or someplace else has it. This has also led, and it's another advantage to consumers, with things like price matching, which is always a benefit to consumers. You get a wider selection of goods. I can go online and type in virtually anything I might be looking for and find many sites where I can comparison shop and see all sorts of different possibilities. Along with advantages, e-commerce comes with risks. Since you don't have a brick and mortar presence, since you don't have a physical store, at least in some of these locations, your whole reputation is your website. So it has to be robust, reliable. It has to be up and running 24/7. You can't have fraudulent transactions. That's a good way to get people to leave your site and never come back. Some people are reluctant to purchase online. You know, you probably have heard horror stories about people who have been burnt. Somebody has stole their information. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. With everyone and every company basically having some kind of a web presence, there's increased competition. As far as consumers, security issues. All right? At a minimum, you should always make sure that when you go to give information of a personal nature, if you look up in the address bar, it shouldn't say HTTP anymore, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It should say HTTPS, which means Hypertext Transfer Protocol over a secure connection. It's not, nothing is 100% secure, but it's more secure. Possible privacy issues. Most people, when they go online and sign up for something, they don't read, you know, if you're asked if you agree with the terms and whatever, most people don't even read it. Some people print it out, I usually do. But if it's, 10, 15 pages long, but a lot of times in there, what they say is you are giving them the right to sell your personal information, like your name, your email address, etc., to other companies. Difficulty with returns is another big one. All right. So here's some business models. All right. B2C, business to consumer. Well, I look at Amazon as being, to me, one of the biggest examples of that. All right. Business to business, we talked before in many chapters back about an extranet. All right. Consumer to consumer. eBay would probably be an example of that. One of the biggest that isn't discussed that much is B2G, business to government. Now, going along with this is the concept of EDI, or electronic data interchange. Notice it's not new, it's been in existence since the 1960s. It's the transfer of data between different companies using networks. In other words, in an ideal world, it's the elimination, it's a paperless society. Now, I was fortunate in that in the mid to late 80s, I was a programmer at AT&T Bell Laboratories in Naperville, Illinois. Then I went and worked at a technical college in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, called Mid-State Technical College. And I worked there for about 3.5 years. Then I went to a company, an aerospace company, lack of better words, in Rockford, Illinois, called Woodward Governor Company. And while at Woodward Governor Company, I was only there a year. It wasn't a good match, me working for them. I was an EDI, or an electronic data interchange, programmer analyst. All right. And one of the first things I was charged to do there was Woodward Governor wanted to go paperless. So I had to go and find them an EDI software package that they gave me a certain dollar amount I could spend. And they wanted all of their partners, and believe me, they're a multi-million-dollar company with thousands of partners. They wanted all of their partners to eventually go paperless. Now, paperless is sort of a misnomer. The first time I ever heard of EDI, I was working for Mid-State Technical College in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and one night I noticed there that they had a seminar that was being put on, and it was called something like EDI, the Paperless Society. Okay, maybe that doesn't sound that interesting, but it was being put on by a paper company. So a paper company was putting on a seminar about being paperless, which intrigued me. So I went to the presentation. It was about an hour long, and afterwards I was one of the people. I waited my turn and talked to the person giving the presentation. And I said, this seems kind of counterintuitive that a paper company would be doing a presentation on going paperless. And the guy just smiled and he said, what you find when you go paperless is you generate more paper. Because people are doing everything electronic, and especially upper level management still wants a hard copy of everything. So they had found that they were generating typically, in companies that went paperless, 25% more paper. Okay, I just found that interesting. So there are many newer technologies that are basically replacing traditional EDI, but it's still used. All right, What do people buy online? Notice the biggest: clothing, accessories, and footwear. $40 billion. This is old. This is 2013. So 2017, I wouldn't be surprised if many of these were doubled, if not more. So these are lower ticket items by and large, where many electronics are going to be higher ticket objects. You know, you might buy a computer online for over $1,000, where, you know, you'd be probably hard pressed to buy $1,000 worth of clothing at a time, although you could. Same thing with furnishing and furniture and home furnishings. So you can see all of the different things that are in here. Who's on the internet? The old joke is, who's not on the internet? And you notice that it spikes in people 18 through 29, and it goes down in people over 65. The higher the income, the greater the chance that they're on the internet. The higher the education level, the greater the chance they're on the internet. And again, these are older. It could even be higher than that right now. Some of the issues with e-commerce, one of the ones is what I mentioned to you in the last chapter, and that is intellectual property. Who owns something? So again, I'm creating these videos. Who owns them? I look at it that they're the joint property of Jeffrey P. Scott and Rankin Technical College. We both own them. We talked a little bit about security, people being able to get your information. It's interesting, I've got an older brother, I've got two of them, but one of my older brothers, actually his security information was breached 3 different times. He was in the United States Navy, and you may have read several years ago about there was someone who left their laptop in their car over the weekend, and their laptop was stolen, and it had a bunch of information about military people, including him. All right. Years later, the insurance company that he was working for, a similar thing happened, and his information was breached again. Years later than that, he did some kind of a financial transaction where he was breached again. All right. Fraud. You may have heard of phishing attacks, phishing. I know I had a friend years ago, actually a colleague, who taught security. All right, so you think, oh, it never happened to him. It didn't. It happened to his son, where his son was phished. In other words, his son had somebody send him an email claiming to be somebody else that was stranded in another country and needed money. And he fell for it and sent them money. Okay. There's taxation issues. If you buy things from overseas, what's the tax rate? If you buy things nationally, what's the tax rate? There's international commerce type of issues. For the security stuff, things like encryption. You want to make sure that any data that gets passed over the internet, especially personal data, is not passed as what's called plain text. Rather, it's encrypted into what's called ciphertext, where if somebody gets a hold of it, unless they have the keys to uncover the encryption, it just looks like garbage to them. So encrypting is sending plain text into ciphertext, and decrypting is the reverse, going from ciphertext back to plain text. And as it says, the encryption and decryption process requires an algorithm and a key. I'm not going to go through these. I mentioned the SSL before. That's HTTPS. And there are a lot. Here's symmetric key encryption, and there's asymmetric key encryption. I'm not the person to talk to if you want to learn about encryption. So you can read what's in the book. There's hash encryption. All right, SSL I already mentioned. A protocol that allows data to be privately exchanged over public network. It's the HTTPS, and it should have the lock icon. They go through here what happens, but again, nothing is totally 100% secure. But what you're trying to do with HTTPS is you're trying to add more levels of security on it, and you're trying to make it as hard as possible for somebody to go and breach your personal space. They go into digital certificates and the like, and again, we'll cover some of this in greater depth and breadth of coverage in class. All right, e-commerce payment methods. Credit card, stored value card, smart card, digital cash. Well, we all know about credit cards, debit cards, all right, etc. I'm not sure what a stored value card is. Smart cards, digital cash. There's all sorts of ways, all right, that you can pay for things. It's funny. My wife is still old school. She doesn't pay anything online, and she uses checks. When she goes to the store, she uses checks. And you can tell that bothers some people, but she's very quick about it. Whereas, as I mentioned before, I know plenty of people who use debit cards, etc., and have no idea how to put those cards into different card readers. All right, some different storefront solutions. You can have an instant online storefront. Shopify and BigCommerce are examples. The idea with that is you can typically get a business up and running, not in a day, but possibly in a few hours. You can buy off-the-shelf shopping cart software, things like OS Commerce and ZenCart. You can have a custom-built solution where somebody basically does build something for you. Or you can kind of combine these two to a semi-custom built, where it's sort of built for you, but you can still do some customization. So that was very quick. But we talked a little bit about e-commerce. We defined e-commerce. Again, the electronic transactions, the selling and buying of goods and services electronically. We identified benefits and risks of e-commerce. Talked very little bit about B2B, B2C, etc., business models. I pretty much skipped over the e-commerce security and encryption. Gave you my own little take on EDI. Talked about who's using e-commerce now, what they're buying with it, who's using the internet, what they're buying with it, etc. A little bit about some issues, security and otherwise, with e-commerce, and ended the chapter talking about some of the different options for order and payment processing. So that's it for Chapter 12. And when I come back in just a minute, I'm going to jump into Chapter 13, which is on the use of search engines. After that, all we have left is Chapter 14, which is our introduction into JavaScript. So I'll be back to talk about search engines momentarily.